Well, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Before we jump into it, a couple quick links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click that like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump into this night-ending bonus upload, shall we? Tonight's final upload is a couple of strange cases that were covered by the media and ones that were, I believe, covered up by the government, especially the last one. I had shared this experience and talked a little bit about it with my dad, Navy man, and he agreed that there is definitely something fishy about the whole case and how it sounds, how it looks, right up to how it smells. And it just smells like ABC government all the way. Also, I'm going to break this final upload of the evening into two parts: cases and a interview that I had done talking about these cases. Let's get into it. The next two encounters or experiences that you are going to hear are very traumatic in my eyes, and they both do connect. The last one is especially saddening, and you will see why after hearing it. Today's first experience. This happened when I was about 7 years old to my uncle. He's no longer with us, and I'd like to share his experience. Growing up, I lived in northern Michigan on 5,000 acres of farm/ranch land that backed up to state land. Nothing but miles of forest and pasture could be seen. Needless to say, it made my family pretty tough, and it takes a lot to spook us. We are all avid hunters, fishermen, and outdoorsmen. Being the only girl, I was raised as a tomboy, and I'm just the same. My uncle went off to join the military, becoming a senior NCO in a prominent Special Force Division of the United States Navy. He was 6'4", built like a wrestler, obviously skilled in survival tactics, and nothing rattled him. He was home on leave and went out hunting as it was deer season. I remember him coming in the house shaking and crying, saying he saw something in the woods. My uncle never cried. He was tough as nails and would tear someone to shreds before he let them make him cry. My grandmother tried to get him to make sense, but he kept saying he saw a Bigfoot mixed with a wolf. My grandmother immediately got my grandfather, and he rounded up the rest of the guys, my dad, a few male cousins, and my uncle, who was still terrified, but went because he didn't want to be labeled as a chicken. They all got their shotguns and ammunition and saddled up the horses to go clear the woods. Apparently, they were aware of the Dogman, but I was blissfully young and ignorant. They told me that I was to stay inside, and for no reason was I to step outside of the house until they returned. I had never heard my dad or my grandfather be so serious, so I hid in my room. Sunset comes around, and they're still not back yet. I'm getting worried at this point because they are never out in the woods after dark. Shortly, I hear the sound of the horses running to the barn and their voices. I'm so relieved. They looked troubled when they came into the house, but didn't say anything, probably to not spook me. At dinner, my dad laid down the law that I was no longer allowed to play outside or go to the barns alone. I had to have my grandfather with me at all times. Of course, I was upset by this, and I felt my independence was being taken away, but I obeyed. The next morning, my dad and grandfather taught me how to shoot. I knew this was serious. I had overheard the adults talking the night before. Apparently, there were tracks where my uncle had his sighting, bigger than any wolf could make, but they were definitely canine. As I said before, my family were avid outdoorsmen and hunters. We can identify tracks easily, but these could not be identified. About 8 feet up in the tree were claw marks. No Michigan bear could have made those. We also found claw marks of about the same height in multiple trees throughout our property. Had cattle mutilated, and not in a way a coyote or a bear would do it. And that lasted the whole winter. We lost about 30 to 40 head of cattle that winter, all of them mutilated, all with the same wolf/dog tracks in the snow. I really feel like this experience changed my uncle. Who knows? He had done multiple tours in the Middle East for Desert Storm and Operation Iraqi Freedom before he had committed suicide. After that experience, though, he was never the same. He went from never ever drinking to never seeing him without a bottle of Jack in his hands, and his eyes were always haunted. He changed his personality and never went out into the woods again. He quit hunting, and he eventually just quit coming home to visit on leave. He didn't even come home for my dad's funeral 2 years later. It was heartbreaking to see him deteriorate the way he did. I truly believe he saw something out there, and ultimately, it killed him. That is one powerful experience. It is very sad. Moving on to the next experience is a missing persons unexplained death or covered up death, I believe. Nothing about this case makes any sense. I covered it when it happened about 6 or 7 months ago, and it's still a missing persons case all this time later. And that person that's missing was a former Navy SEAL and former park ranger. September 29th, 2021. Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming. Yellowstone National Park officials say an autopsy has determined that a man whose body was found on the shore of a lake died of hypothermia. The body of 67-year-old Mark O'Neill of Chimacum, Washington, was found September 20th on the eastern shore of Shoshan Lake. O'Neill's brother, 74-year-old Kim Crumbo of Ogden, Utah, remains missing. The men were on a 4-night backcountry trip and reported overdue. Park officials said Wednesday they will continue to look for Crumbo as the conditions allow. A vacant campsite was found on the lake's south side. Shoshan Lake averages 48 degrees, a temperature that can be deadly within a half an hour. The fouling was sent out by the National Park Service. An autopsy has been completed on 67-year-old Mark O'Neill, whose body was found on the east shore of Shoshan Lake in Yellowstone National Park Monday, September 20th. The autopsy determined the cause of death of O'Neill was exposure. O'Neill from Chimacum, Washington, along with his brother, 74-year-old Kim Crumbo from Ogden, Utah, was reported overdue by a family member Sunday, September 19th. from their 4-night backcountry trip to Shoshone Lake. Search and recovery efforts continue at the lake to locate Crumbo. Crews from the National Park Service Submerged Resource Center are using sonar equipment to detect clues in the water. Park crews continue to search for Crumbo by foot and boat with the assistance from Grand Teton National Park's helicopter team and dog teams from Western Montana Search Dogs. These recovery efforts will continue for the next several days as conditions warrant. This incident remains under investigation. While we cannot comment any further about the specifics of the investigation, we will provide updates when appropriate to do so. If you have any information that could help investigators piece together a timeline of events, or if you were at the Shoshone Lake area between September 12th through the 19th, please contact us. If you have not already, 307-344-2428. A sincere thank you to the public who have expressed interest in assisting with the search. We ask the public to maintain distance from any law enforcement personnel and search crews, equipment, vehicles, and their related activity for the safety of the public in this remote area and to protect the integrity of our work. October 11th, 2021, Tribune News Services, a 74-year-old former Navy SEAL, has been missing in Yellowstone National Park for 3 weeks, Rangers state. Kim Crumbo left in September for a 4-night camping trip in Yellowstone's backcountry with his brother and has not been seen since. The search has continued for nearly 3 weeks using helicopters, boats, sonar technology, and ground crews. Park rangers said in an October 8th news release, current weather forecasts call for deteriorating conditions over the upcoming week, including snow and freezing temperatures. Park officials will continue to search for Crumbo as long as the weather allows, but have begun scaling back the recovery effort. Crumbo was reported missing September 19th after he and his brother did not return from a camping trip, park officials state. His brother, 67-year-old Mark O'Neill, was found dead a day later near Shoshone Lake, the park's second largest lake. He died of hypothermia, park officials state. Shoshone Lake has an average temperature of about 48 degrees year-round, according to National Park Service. People could only survive in that water for about 30 minutes. Crumbo was visiting the park from Ogden, Utah. Both O'Neill and Crumbo worked for the National Park Service, and Crumbo is a former Navy SEAL, park officials say. Authorities said they are conducting an investigation. November 15th, 2021. Guys, we get to hear these news articles, but we really don't get to hear who these people were. Kim Crumbo, yes, was 74 years old, but 74 is not that old if you take care of yourself. And he was a former Navy SEAL, park ranger, avid hiker. And if you go and look at pictures of him, he was definitely in good shape for his age. When you are a former special forces, when you are a former special force officer or NCO or what have you, you don't forget that training so easy, do you? He didn't. And he was a badass. And this next piece of information will kind of introduce you to who he was and why it does not make sense for him to be missing. When Becky Crumbo first saw Shoshone Lake, she couldn't fathom how a storm strong enough to endanger the lives of two experienced outdoorsmen could have blown in so suddenly. The cold water was like glass, she said, but in a boat on that remote lake in Yellowstone's National Park, with members of her family and the National Park Service, she understood. In what felt like only minutes, the tranquil water was starting to get scary, she said. In that moment, she knew what must have happened to her missing husband, Kim Crumbo, and his brother, Mark Crumbo O'Neill, who was found dead on the shore. It was a perfect storm, she said. When Crumbo went missing, the 74-year-old Ogden man's friend and colleagues took to social media to express their disbelief that such a legend, as many described him, could have disappeared in the wilderness. As a Vietnam War veteran, former Navy SEAL, experienced river runner, retired park ranger, he knew how to handle himself in wild places. Like his friend, Edward Abbey, the author and environmentalist, Crumbo knew the land, they said. Dad was a SEAL, and everything that came with that, cranking out horizontal push-ups off a yield sign after a six-pack of beer, and the like, Daniel Crumbo, one of Kim Crumbo's two sons, said. If I was in a pinch in a wild place, and I had one person to call upon, it would be Kim Crumbo, said John Davis, head of the conservation organization that Crumbo had been working for when he went missing. Since her husband's disappearance, Becky Crumbo has gotten several messages and phone calls from people who knew him well, convinced that something sinister happened to him. She said, but his wife of 48 years doesn't believe that. It was a fluke thing, and it was an act of nature, she said. And yeah, they both survived a whole lot of things in their life, she continued, but they didn't survive this one. Crumbo, the legend. All of his friends said he was a legend. All right, guys. His wife, I really feel so sad for her. My parents have been married for 51 years. They'll be married 51 years. 48 years is no short time. But he was a SEAL. He survived buds. He survived the Vietnam War. He was not a slouch. He would know what to do if that boat or whatever happened. They don't even know if he was on a boat. All they know is they found his brother on the east shore of the lake. They may have been... Yellowstone is a mysterious, deadly park. We honestly have no idea what exists there. There's been rumors of portals, Dogman, Bigfoot, crawlers, even scarier and worse monster things. Whatever, look at Skinwalker Ranch, guys, where that hunter was propped up and a portal opened in front of him and he said he saw this horrendous monster come out and just scurry off into the woods. If there's portals in Yellowstone, imagine what is in Yellowstone, my friends. Imagine. And I do not believe a former Navy SEAL, former park ranger, and still working for a conservation organization died so easily. Crumbo, the legend, after becoming a public figure in the conservation world and appearing in some of Abby's writings, Kim Crumbo would eventually achieve minor celebrity status, his son states. Both Kim Crumbo and Mark Crumbo O'Neill were extraordinary and equally remarkable men, Daniel Crumbo said. An updated newspaper clipping from the San Diego Union, now the San Diego Union Tribune, features a photo of Kim Crumbo, taken just after he and the rest of his SEAL Team 1 were awarded the Presidential Unit Citation from President Richard Nixon for extraordinary heroism in Vietnam. In addition to the Presidential Award, Crumbo also received a Bronze Star that day for personal acts of heroism. He was photographed standing with his mother, Patricia Elliott. Daniel Crumbo described his uncle O'Neill as a second dad, who was the tall, lean, incredibly good-looking, charming younger brother that always had to outdo whoever did anything before him. Kim Crumbo and O'Neill had both worked as professional river guides. Crumbo was the first full-time employee of Dee Holliday, founder of Holiday River Expeditions, and he also worked for Ken Slate, the famous river runner, wilderness guide, and activist. The two brothers were such familiar sights on the Colorado River that they were immortalized in a poem by Vaughn Short called Seldom Seen and His Macho Crew. Seldom Seen Smith is a character inspired by Slate in the Abbey's 75 classic novel, The Monkey Wrench Gang, about using sabotage to protest the destruction of the environment. According to William Putnam, who put Short's words into music, the poem tells the story of a Grand Canyon raft trip in the 70s when the Bureau of Reclamation was using most of the Colorado's water to fill in behind a newly built Glen Canyon Dam. They say the river cannot run the water down. It can't be done. But if anyone can shoot it through, it's old Seldom Seen and his macho crew. There were Kim and Mark, the Crumbo Two, a couple of Bobs, and a guy named Stu, making up the macho team that rowed their boats for the Seldom Seen. Wow, that's cool. Let's do that again. They say the river can't be run. The water's down. It can't be done. But if anyone can shoot it through, it's old Seldom Seen and his macho crew. There were Kim and Mark, the Crumbo Two, a couple of Bobs and a guy named Stu, making up that macho team that rowed the boats for Seldom Seen. Damn, that's cool. Crumbo's disappearance. Relatives first reported the brothers overdue from a backcountry trip on September 19th. When they didn't return from their expected 4-night excursion, that day searchers found a vacant campsite on the south side of the lake, which can be reached only by foot. The next day, O'Neill, 67, of Chimacum, Washington, was found dead on the east shore of the lake, along with a canoe, paddle, personal flotation device, and other items. An autopsy later revealed that O'Neill had died of exposure, specifically hypothermia, park officials announced. Crews kept looking for Crumbo, who's still missing, with assistance from search dogs. They swept each trail in the area and searched the shoreline of Shoshin Lake by boat, gridding the water by helicopter, park officials say. But the days-long search transitioned from a rescue to a recovery effort later that week. The Park Service Submerged Resource Center then began using sonar equipment to search for clues in the lake's depths, to no avail. On October 8th, Yellowstone officials announced the recovery effort was being scaled back because of snow and freezing temperatures. It marked the last formal update of that park. All of us at the Yellowstone extend our deepest sympathies to the family, friends, and colleagues of both Mark and Kim, Superintendent Cam Scholey said in the news release that day. I want to personally thank the teams from Yellowstone, other parks and agencies, and partner organizations who work to help us locate Mark and continue to search to bring Kim home. Authorities continue to investigate what happened to the two brothers. Unofficial searches also are ongoing. Crumbo's wife said as volunteers continue to walk the perimeter of Shoshin Lake. The timing of the accident is unspeakably sad, but I take some comfort in knowing that they left us doing what they loved, Daniel Crumbo said, and that they had each other in what would be their last of many shared struggles. Both are dearly loved and missed, and deservedly so. I can't imagine how he didn't make it out of this one, said Ken Sanders, proprietor of Ken Sanders Rare Books in Salt Lake City. He said he got to know Kim Crumbo when they both appeared in the film Wrenched, a documentary about Abby's eco-activism legacy. Fare thee well, Crumbo, wherever you are, Sanders said. Crumbo's legacy. Over the course of 2 decades, Crumbo worked as a National Park Service river ranger, resource management specialist, and wilderness coordinator in the Grand Canyon National Park, as well as a park ranger. He retired from the Park Service in '99. O'Neill also worked as a park ranger at Washington's Olympic National Park and the Grand Canyon before retiring from the Park Service. Kelly Burke, a geologist and the executive director of Wild Arizona, met Crumbo about 3 decades ago on the Colorado River. describing him as one of my dearest, most important friends and mentor and collaborator and warrior hero. Burke said he protected her from the very beginning. While facing rough rapids and harsh elements, Crumbo and Burke worked together on numerous projects along the river, repairing trails, collaborating with members of the Zuni tribe to control erosion of cultural and archaeological sites, and removing non-native and invasive plant species. One such effort involved removing tamarisk shrubs from a location in Glen Canyon called Hidden Sloth, and replacing them with native cottonwood and willow trees. Today, those trees tower above the water. Crumbo was well-read and intelligent, she said, and could speak at length about history, philosophy, and the river. He wrote a river runner's guide to the history of the Grand Canyon, in which he went into meticulous detail of nearly every mile of the 277-mile run from its start at Lee's Ferry to its end, the Grand Walsh Cliffs. Crumbo overlapped with many different groups and organizations over the years in his work to conserve and protect wild places, wildlife habitat connections, and large predators, especially wolves. At the time of his trip to Yellowstone, he was working long hours as a board member and the Wildlands coordinator for conservation nonprofit, the Rewilding Institute. He also was serving as a board member for the Western Wildlife Conservancy and Wild Arizona, the merging of Arizona Wilderness Coalition with the Grand Canyon Wildlands Council, which he founded. And he was contributing to the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance, a land conservation group, as well as the wildlife conservation groups Lobos of the Southwest and Project Coyote. Crumbo was highly skilled, highly dedicated, said John Davis, the Rewilding Institute's executive director, who had trekked through miles of wilderness with his friend and colleague. Crumbo was just doing the right thing for wild nature. Burke agreed, saying Crumbo had been on fire lately. Part of those efforts involved working with the Rewilding Institute to revise several of his papers in draft form. On October 26, the Rewilding Institute posed a draft proposal that Crumbo had written in April to garner support for the Grand Staircase Wildlife Corridor. Kim's tragic disappearance left us all wondering how to carry on his heroic work for wild places and creatures. Read an editor's note accompanying the post. We quickly decided one of many ways we needed to help solidify Kim's great legacy is by publishing his wild visions, even if they were in rough form. The world should know what Kim aimed to achieve. The proposal describes Crumbo's vision to be for a protected wild area that would go from Grand Canyon National Park in Arizona through Bryce Canyon National Park in southern Utah, linking habitat for migrating mule deer and mountain lions. With Kim's words echoing in our minds and hearts, the editor's note continues, we call upon our fellow wilderness and wildlife advocates to push for protection of this whole area. A potential major contribution to 30 by 30, the conservation plan endorsed by President Joe Biden that aims to conserve at least 30% of the U.S. lands and waters by 2030. Well, at least Crumbo's legacy will get this done. We all know that, well, never mind. Crumbo the man. Kim Crumbo and Mark Crumbo O'Neill were both larger-than-life characters, Daniel Crumbo said. But what people know less of, he continued, is how giving, loving, caring, and thoughtful these two men were. Kim Crumbo completed 2 combat deployments in Vietnam, but he really hated war, his wife noted. Her husband wouldn't like her analyzing, she said, but she thought the desert landscape of the Grand Canyon gave him good contrast to Vietnam. He was gracious, refined, Burke said, but he also had a mischievous side and a wry sense of humor. He was a fan of director Mel Brooks movies, especially Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein. Terry Cleveland, who took 2 river trips with Crumbo in the 80s, said Crumbo was charismatic but also humble. She recalls him hiking 10 miles out of the Grand Canyon like it was nothing just to meet up with somebody. It's hard to believe that nature caught up with him finally because he seemed indestructible. That legend continues. In his many heavy-duty adventures, Crumbo did have a lot of close scrapes that he never should have survived. He had been in a helicopter crash in Vietnam, and the aircraft had burst into flames. He had been attacked by elk. He had faced innumerable monstrous river rapids. 4 years ago, he also had both of his shoulders replaced, one after another, and it had taken its toll on him. Ironically, when Crumbo and his brother chose to go to Yellowstone, they had been wanting to get to a low-key getaway. A few days in a beautiful place would recharge them mentally and spiritually. Perhaps they found it after seeing their reflections in the Shoshan Lake's still waters. She thinks Crumbo and O'Neill may have been deceived by the tranquility and mistakenly thought they didn't need to wear life jackets. She believes a microburst hit the lake that September day, creating treacherous weather conditions that would have tested the limits of any legend, let alone 2 men with aging bodies. When asked if she held any hope that Crumbo may still be alive, no, flatly. Her family is planning to hold a memorial service for Crumbo in Tucson, Arizona later this month. Even if Crumbo's body is found someday, it may never be known what exactly happened to him and his brother, but according to his longtime friend and fellow Sierra Club volunteer, Jim Catlin, Crumbo died the way that made most sense for him. He went into the wild itself. They say the river can't be run. The water's down, it can't be done. But if anyone can shoot it through, it's old Seldom Seen and his macho crew. There were Kim and Mark, the Crumbo too. A couple of Bobs and a guy named Stu, making up that macho team that rowed the boats for Seldom Seen. That final poem at the end gets me every time. And I don't know if it's because my dad was retired Navy. He was a brown water Navy in Vietnam, then worked intelligence for a couple years, then retired from the Department of the Navy. So I don't know. It's like I have a connection to Crumbo a little bit. But strange case. Right here is the final part of this night ending bonus upload. This is an interview that I did on another channel, Sean Atwood, who is one of the people that I look up to in the YouTube community because he is really straight up, honest, good guy. And he does talk a little bit about cryptids periodically and such on certain days, but the majority of his channel is conspiracy and prison lockup stories. A lot of just amazing information on Sean's channel. But he and I kind of struck up a friendship, and I was asked to do an interview on his channel one day. So here is that interview.
To Jeff. Jeff, good evening, sir. How are you?
Stephen, how are you? Nice to
I'm wonderful. Thank you very much. Let's look at that wonderful piece of art there behind you for our viewers who can see. What am I looking at there?
Yeah, a subscriber painted that for me and sent it to me. Can you hear me?
Excellent. Well, please do tell. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yep.
That's great. That's great. Slight delay, but I'm sure we'll manage to work through it. So maybe you can just take a moment, Jeff, just tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel. What does it focus on?
Well, I started out my channel on pretty much cryptid encounters, reptilian, Bigfoot, Dogman, and just like narrating encounters. And then I started to kind of get more fascinated with um, the whole community, and I started to see things that were happening in the community, people being attacked, a lot of just, the disappearances in national parks, this and that, and it really fascinated me. Stayed in the field of narrating and interviewing people with their encounters, but then I started to investigate these animal attacks, quote, animal attacks. There's one that just happened last year, and to me it's a cover up because it happened in Tennessee, in Cott County, Tennessee. And April 1st, there was a gentleman attacked, and Tony Aarons was his name. He was found pretty much dismembered on Jimtown Road. Well, at midnight, someone had spoken to him at 9:30 at night, 3 hours prior, and he was fine. So this guy miraculously gets shredded, like his soft tissue and his stomach,
just
his
froze
legs,
up a little bit there,
arms.
right at the good stuff from the sounds of it. Can you hear me, Jeff? Are you back with us?
Yeah, I can hear
Excellent.
you.
I think the last word I may have heard there was shredded. So please don't
Yeah,
keep
well,
us waiting.
this Tony Aarons guy he was supposedly, he lived in a homeless encampment at the end of this road called Jimtown Road, and it's a very rural area, and it's poor, a very poor community down there. Good people, but not a lot of money. So this guy is found. His leg is pretty much hanging off his arm. His soft stomach tissue is torn up, and he's a guy named Charles Owensby finds him and calls 911. Well, they kind of dismiss it as a dog attack. Even though there's no proof of any dogs, they're found on a dirt road and scuff marks, this and that. Then in July, they kind of just they do like a 2-page write-up on it in the media, and I'm like, that's weird, like there's no closure to it. So then in July, a girl named Amber Miller was attacked in the same location, literally same location, Jimtown Road. And she was found by a Good Samaritan who happened to be driving down the road. There were 3 dogs that were with her. They were licking her wounds. They weren't biting her, they were licking her. And she had was brought to the hospital. She herself was torn apart, arms, legs. It was a very, very vile and grotesque attack. She ended up dying in the hospital. Well, they said that, these dogs were, but because there was DNA evidence on the dogs where the blood that they had been licking. If this Good Samaritan was able to walk up and save this girl, anybody who has had dogs and have, seen dog attacks or anything, they know once a dog attacks somebody, it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop biting and tearing. It's then start licking this girl. And then if this guy comes in and tries to stop it, they're going to attack him as well. Well, that didn't happen. They just kind of parted way, let the guy take the girl, put her in the truck, and bring her to the hospital. So she passes away, and then the guy named Charles Owensby is labeled the culprit of it. They pretty much slandered him. He was a black gentleman, poor, and they ended up putting a warrant out for to search evidence for his house and his ex-wife's house, which is like 5 miles down the road. They incarcerate him for a minor bit of marijuana, and in America, I mean, it was anywhere between, I think it was like less than a half an ounce of weed. So I mean, that's in America nowadays, it's nothing, that's a slap on the wrist. He shouldn't have been incarcerated. They incarcerate him, and they do a really thorough investigation on this guy. They take his dog, they dig up a dog that had been dead for like 6 months, to get DNA from a dog that had been dead during the attacks, so then they release him on $1,000 bond, and they pretty much just responsible. He's responsible. Well, there's no evidence of him being responsible. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, this is weird. These dogs didn't do this, obviously. And I start looking into it more and more. And then during Owensby's release, he's in his trailers, and the public, not the public, but the community, like community workers, are hassling him. And one night there was a shot at his trailer. Someone had taken and shot a gun at his trailer. Well, he called the police department and said, hey, someone just shot at my trailer. And it would have been where he was lying down. Police came and did an investigation. They said, we can't find a shell casing. And that bullet hole's old. Well, how do they know the bullet hole is old? Because they were prior. And anybody who goes to the rifle range or who is in law enforcement or anything knows that, if you're going to assassinate somebody, clean up your brass. That's what you pick up your brass. You don't leave evidence behind. So that was a big thing.
Just to interject, what comes across very clear is obviously you do not buy the official narrative of dog attacks.
No.
I think you used, many of our viewers may have noticed you used air quotes earlier when you said animal attacks. So it's clear you're very skeptical of it. You don't accept the official stories from the police. That sort of like invites the question, what do you think it is? What do you think is responsible for these sort of attacks?
I like the guest prior, I have been researching and looking into Bigfoot and a kind of offshoot of a Bigfoot. People in America have seen, and in England, called the Dogman. It's like it's a hominid, and it's a very violent creature. Some people think that it's related to a Bigfoot. I think it possibly may be an offshoot or something entirely different. There was a subscriber of mine had taken his motorcycle down there and rode down and ended up talking to someone from that homeless encampment. And he's talking to him, and the guy said, had a decent conversation with him. And then he said, yeah, be careful on your way out. He goes, these things will come out of the woods and take you off your motorcycle. He didn't say what, but almost like insinuating, hey, there's something out in these woods that will take you off of your motorcycle. There had been large canine tracks in the dirt or dust for the first Tony Aaron's attack. And there's been multiple attacks like this throughout our country. And people have been seeing these creatures in these vicinities. And I think it is one of these creatures. I think there's multiple of them, just like I think there's multiple Bigfoot. I think that to answer a question that you had asked the previous guest, I don't think people find these things because I think they're nocturnal, and I think they travel at night and they have a broad area that they roam. So yeah, that's what I think is going on.
That's a potential explanation. There's been a flurry of questions on this topic, people wanting to pick your brain on it. We have one from Easy E. They're asking, what do you think of the documentaries Hellier and Skinwalkers Ranch? I'm hoping that means more to you than me.
This watched In Search of Skinwalker Ranch and stuff. I think that it's an amazing documentary. Navajo lore is powerful. It's an unexplainable thing. I've talked about it on my channel before. You've got people claiming that there's portals, people claiming that there's these large canine military involvement. It's a very sacred place. A lot of Ute Native Americans were killed in that area by Navajo, and yeah, that place is a mystery. You've got a location that said UFO, cryptid, and paranormal all in one place. There's something special about it.
What is the most compelling piece of evidence you may point people towards to help convince them that these aren't regular animal attacks?
If you look at the media, JK, I think that was his name, the dark journalist or whatever, he had said that the media works for big pharma, oil, military. We get 80% of our media from that. Our news is from big bank, big pharma, oil, military, and they just kind of feed the media what they want to hear. And the media then paints a picture of what these companies, these organizations, not companies, want them to paint. So when I look at these attacks, if there's wording that's kind of off, or let's say one of these, like, so this Tony Aaron's Amber Miller attack, it's, you got two people that had died. Then they start painting the victims as losers or less than. You know, they bring up drug addiction, have victims. Why are you bringing up their past? Just because they had an addiction doesn't mean that they are any less than, you know what I mean, or deserve to be attacked. You know, the sheriff of the Cott County, Tennessee, Armando Fuentes, he had made a statement that said methamphetamine was the cause of Tony Aaron's death, and I was like, so whatever, even if it was the dog that did it, let's say the dogs did it, the dogs smelled the meth on him and they wanted to get high off his blood or something, you know, it makes no sense. It's a lot of BS in the wording. And you know, I have interviewed probably 500 people who have claimed to have seen some sort of Bigfoot, Dogman, reptilian is something. And it's not just people, random people. Like, I've had a sheriff from Louisiana come on and say he had seen a large, like, canine run across the road. He had no idea what it was. He had to turn around and go back and look for it. But by the time he had turned around, it was gone. And it kind of messed his whole night up, you know?
So, I mean, I find it interesting what you say about the media as a whole. And I agree that it's possible and often the case that many outlets have an agenda and a bias and a sort of style and line that they toe to. So I suppose what would be stopping some sort of alternative media outlet or some independent journalists from actually exposing this, people who aren't beholden to sort of, you know, big pharma? Or
people really are aware of it, you know, either they're not aware of it or they don't care. It's not something that they want to care about. You know, it's not money, you know. The world revolves around money, and it's not a large, you know, talking about random attacks and taking the time to really look at them. This is a file of all different attacks in America that don't make sense, that are like that Tony Aaron's Amber Miller. And that's hours and hours of researching it, and then looking at the area to see if there had been any kind of strange sightings of any kind of strange creature. There was something that just happened in Virginia. Tazewell County, Virginia is right next to Buchanan, and then right across the border is Mercer County, West Virginia, and they fit almost like a jigsaw. And there had been numerous accounts of people. There had been 8 deaths, 8 weird disappearances and deaths in the last 6 months. There was 3 guys that were found dead, all the same age, which was kind of weird. I was like, that's really, and in any kind of field, there really isn't coincidence, I don't think. But one guy was found in a kind of one of those drainage tubes that go under the road, like a culvert, and he had disappeared. The search and rescue went and looked for him like a year ago, and ironically enough, there's his body in this and I had actually called the Tazewell County, Virginia's police department, and I said, hey, how are you? My name is Jeff Nadolny. I'm an independent journalist. I'm just looking into this case. And it was Richard Timmy was the guy's name. And I said, I'd heard you found his body. And the sheriff said, yeah, there was 2 bodies in the culvert, and there was no mention of a second body in any of the media. So there's just a lot of weird business going on with the media and the government. I think they work hand in hand to keep secrets away from us, not only with this, but with UFOs, with assassinations, with a lot, and they work hand in hand together.
What do you think of a story of a beast in land between the lakes? Is that a source of pain for former residents as well?
Yeah. I'm friends with a gentleman who, his name's Tim Baker. He worked for NASA back in the 70s, and he had been researching on his own, just, as a hobby, Bigfoot accounts. And he had been, he grew up in like Alabama and like Muscle Shoals, so he's familiar with that kind of area. And there's a lot of speculation on that case. You've got a family of 4 that were supposedly torn up, and the media never covered it. But you've got people that, third party people coming and saying, I heard this, I was friends with these people. And then people tend to add on to the stories. I believe that an attack did happen there. It's been talked about for 40 years. It happened in like 1983 or 4. No one knows the exact date. And that, I believe, is because of a cover-up. I talking to somebody who knew a park ranger there, and they had stated that, yes, the attack did happen. Mother and father and the little boy were found like 15 feet in a tree.
So I mean, this is it's interesting. It's very dark. It involves real people, real murder, real loss. And I accept you are an individual who's interested in pursuing the truth. You want to find out what has happened. I suppose on the flip side of that coin, do you ever worry about the potential distress maybe caused to the family of these victims if somebody's sort of challenging official narratives and saying there's more to this, and potentially opening old wounds for these families as well?
There was a little boy named Corey Godsey in Knott County, Kentucky. And he was 13 years old. and he was dragged up a 300 to 400 foot kind of rock side embankment, and they claimed that it was a dog. We're talking 110, 120 pound boy dragged up a cliff, which is very there was a lot of people.
Were there any witnesses to this, or is this something they pieced together afterwards?
No, they found he had not been, they found him up on this cliffside with puncture wounds. And so a lot of channels and a lot of people had been talking about it and saying this and that. And I had kind of reached out to a person that lived in Knott County, Kentucky, and he went to school with Corey's mom and knew the dad and knew the EMT person, knew the responding police officer. And the mom was told there was, I believe, one interview with the mom on national news. And I was told that she was told to shut up and just don't talk about the case. And I interviewed this guy on my channel about the case and about how the community was. And I was concerned about the mom, this, that, and, he said, maybe I can get her to come on your channel and talk about, everything. And I was like, no, I don't want to bring anything up, but I just want her to know that nobody's forgotten about her kid, like it's almost like this little boy was attacked. The case is still an open case. It's not a closed case, and nobody talks about it anymore. Nobody's looking into it anymore. So I just want people to know that these people who are attacked with no answers are still thought about.
What is your instinct in terms of the reaction to it then? Because is there a sort of general apathy towards the ideas you have because people don't take them seriously, or do they take them seriously and they're attempting to sort of cover them up?
Well, I was my parents are the biggest skeptics in the world. They are vanilla ice cream. And my mom had said something about, what are you doing? And I was just like, well, I said, listen to this. I said, with the, and I hate to bring up the case in Tennessee, but it's the one case that has piqued my interest, and it drives me insane actually to think about it. But I said, just let's take out Bigfoot, take out Dogman, take out any kind of paranormal out of that equation, right? You've got two people that were savagely attacked and torn up in the same exact location, in a location that's kind of the dilapidated part of town, very rural, very, isolated from the upper city part. I'm like, take all that apart and then so you take the creatures out, but don't have any mountain lion sightings. There's been very, very rare black bear sightings. A pack of wild dog, and there are no wild dog in America. A wild dog is a species of animal that lives in Africa, and the media tends to love to use wild dog attack. Well, we don't have African dogs in America, so how are they, coming here and chewing up people? But you take that out, and you're left with two people torn up, no explanation, both open cases, and a guy who Charles Owensby is not even heard of anymore. You can't even. I reached out to him on Facebook, and his Facebook thing is gone now. There's no mention of him in the news. I'd called Cobb County Sheriff's Office and said, "What's going on with Charles Owensby? Last time we heard from him or anything about him in the news was September of 2021. Is he still in jail? No, he's out of jail. What's going on with the case? We can't talk about it anymore." So I'm like, with that weirdness going on, you're telling me there's an open investigation on dog attacks? No.
Well, I mean, I noticed that you'd obviously listened to our previous guest on Bigfoot, and I suppose he has you at a disadvantage in the sense they have some footage, the Peterson film.
I I've talked to people about that footage.
Well,
A friend
Dub in
that
the sorry, one of our audience members, Dub it's called Dub, he's in the chat, and he's asked, what do you think about that Peterson film? Do you think it's genuine or not? Are you sold on it?
Yeah, I think that footage is legit. I'm friends with a woman named Claudia Ackley, who is friends with Bob Gemlin, who took the film, and she had put me in touch with him. I'd briefly spoken to him briefly because he's very old now. He has Alzheimer's and stuff. And I think that is probably the most 9 people claiming that they were in the suit. You know, where's the suit now? If that really happened, why aren't they bringing us the suit? You know, to show us, hey, this is what was worn. You know, I feel that is really compelling evidence that there are creatures out there that we don't see very often. I agreed with his like lava tube thing. Another thing is with you, I think you had said trees. There was a gentleman. I live in the Adirondacks in New York, so it's a very huge. It's one of the biggest state parks in our country. And there was a guy named Tom Mezek who disappeared. He was a hunter. And it's a very strange case. FBI came and was involved in the search and stuff like that. FBI doesn't get involved in cases like that unless state lines were crossed or tender-aged youth. This guy was 82. I believe that he was looking for things. When you're looking for a missing person, you're looking for evidence on the ground. You're not looking up. And I believe that these creatures use the trees to their advantage.
This is excellent. It sounds like something that may one day be perfect fodder for a quality horror movie. But Jeff, I appreciate you coming on and speaking to us. Is there anything you'd like to point people towards before I let you get back to what's left of your afternoon? Where can they find more of your content?
My channel is called Dogman Encounters with Jeffrey Nadolny, and I've narrated 3 audiobooks. They were written by Tom Lyons, who has investigated these attacks and encounters, called Dogman Frightening Encounters Volume 1, 2, and 3, and they are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes.
That's excellent, Jeff. Thank you very much for your time and all the best with your investigations.
Stephen, thank you. It was great meeting you, and have a wonderful.
You too. Thank you.